we have here today a story of Thomas refusing to believe. The disciples were bubbling with excitement. They had experienced the resurrection presence of Jesus Christ. He is not dead. He is risen, they proclaimed. He was with us. He ate with us and taught us and spoke with us. Come on, Thomas. You've got to believe. I won't believe it, he said, until I see the nail prints, until I put out my fingers and touch them and put my hand in his side. I won't believe. He would have been a good Missourian, a good showy stater. Jesus stood for the test. Put your fingers here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe. Thomas didn't really need to touch Jesus. It doesn't say that he did at all. It simply says that he proclaimed, "My Lord and my God," or in Aramaic, simply Adonai Elohim. The most amazing, highest affirmation you could possibly make among the Hebrew people is to proclaim Adonai Elohim, Lord and God. And that is what he proclaims about Jesus. You are my Lord and my God. He goes from being the doubter, the one who would expect that Jesus would die, the one who would never believe it until he saw it, the one who said, "I will not believe it," goes from a lack of faith to true faith. Goes from a lack of believing to true faithing, exercising belief. He went from being closed to being open, from being blind to seeing, from being a denier to a proclaimer. This transformation in Thomas is hard to explain. Change is never easy. If you're like me, you've got to be pushed and shoved and compelled and empowered to change. I don't like change. And none of these disciples had it in their nature to want to change. If you look at their lives, Peter, putting left foot in mouth, impetuous, saying with one moment, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God," and then the next minute, "Oh, Jesus, come on, you're not going to do that, you're wrong." And Jesus responding, "Get behind me, Satan." Or Peter saying, "I'll go to death for you. Here, sword." And Jesus' response, before the cock crows, "You will deny me." Peter, so terrified that he followed at a distance. Peter, so afraid that he denied that he even knew Jesus. Peter running away with tears into the darkness. This Peter is the same Peter who, after the resurrection, stood in the temple and proclaimed Jesus, even though the high priests said, "Shut up, don't talk about him." On pain of persecution, he would not shut up. Indeed, on pain of death, he didn't shut up. He continued to proclaim Jesus all the way to Rome and all the way to his own cross, being crucified upside down according to tradition. He died proclaiming that from which he had run. He died proclaiming that Jesus the Lord was risen. He died even though he didn't have to. have stopped proclaiming. He could have run and hid himself again in the ancient world. But he kept proclaiming his faith. Thomas went east. He went to India and proclaimed the gospel of Jesus Christ in India and died for it there. There are Christians in India today who trace their church back to Thomas's ministry. There are other disciples, indeed all but John, died for the faith. Matthew was arrested in Ethiopia, and there he was nailed to the ground with short spears through his hands and feet, and then his head was chopped off. All he had to do to survive was shut up. All he had to do to keep from being killed was deny his Lord. Change his story. Who would know? He's in Ethiopia, the furthest edge outside the empire even. Who's going to know? Just change his story, and you can live. But instead, he died for the faith. Matthew, who, along with the rest of the disciples, ran from the arrest in the garden. Matthew died for the faith. Bartholomew, also known as Nathanael, a missionary to what we call today Turkey, was killed for preaching in Armenia. He was flayed to death with cat-o'-nine tails. Kind of expensive, this faith, isn't it? Andrew was crucified on an X-shaped cross. We call it the St. Andrew's cross because of this. He was crucified on an X-shaped cross in Greece after having proclaimed the gospel in Armenia and in Georgia, not Georgia, United States, Georgia, former Soviet Union. Paul, persecuting the church, was converted by the resurrected Christ, totally changed from a persecutor of the church to a proclaimer of the gospel. Total, complete change. He went to death, being beheaded because he was a Roman citizen, proclaiming the gospel, proclaiming the good news. He could have changed the story. He could have stopped proclaiming it. He could have run away and hid. He could have started persecuting the church again. But he didn't. Philip was crucified. James, son of Zebedee, the brother of John, was beheaded by King Herod. James, the brother of the Lord, who was too terrified to follow Jesus in Jesus' life, who didn't believe in Jesus in Jesus' life, who came to faith in Jesus as the Messiah, headed up the church in Jerusalem. He was so respected by the other Jews in the community that they thought that if given the choice between death and denying his brother as the Messiah, he'd choose denying his brother as the Messiah. It was the middle of the war against Rome, and they needed all the help they could get, especially from this Jewish Christian Messianic group that James was heading up. And so they said, James, you're such a holy person. You're in the temple all the time. You're on your knees. You have camel's knees as a result. Come on, just join us. Deny your brother, and we'll get along well. And James said no. So they threw him from the pinnacle of the temple, and that didn't kill him. They beat him to death at the club. All of the disciples and the apostles who followed went from fear and denial, refusal to believe, to faith, even in the face